second part of the fermentation lab. I just wrote down here gluten. That's the protein that you find in wheat and some other grains as well. And it's composed of glutenin and gliadin. Gliadin and glutenin, those are the two proteins. So what they do is, I talked about how they kind of come together and they form kind of a network. And you can see here by looking at here how I can take this dough. You see I can stretch it. It's not going to break. I can stretch it. It's very stretchable. And if you made brownies or cake, you couldn't do that, right? It doesn't have so it has elasticity. It's elastic, and that's why we get such good texture with a yeast bread. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to punch this down. So I'm going to just remove some of the bubbles in here. And I'm just going to put this in my loaf pan. And we're going to come back to this. It's going to be part C here. But in the meanwhile, I'm just going to talk about a couple of things here. Have you ever been to San Francisco and tasted sourdough bread? It tastes great, doesn't it? You go to Fisherman's Wharf. I'm sure some of you have been there and tasted the bread. And the reason it tastes so good there is because they have unique yeast and bacteria in the atmosphere. And that's why you can never, it doesn't matter how much I try, I can never make San Francisco sourdough bread at home. It doesn't work. So it all depends where you live, the conditions. All right, so we're going to let that rise, and we're going to come back to that. In the meanwhile, we're going to talk about what other things around your house do you think you have that are fermented. So I'm just going to go to my fridge, and I'm just going to show you a few things. One obviously probably is, of course, yogurt. Yogurt, we have cheese. Cheese, right? Cheese fermented. Some things you may not think about is soy sauce. Hot sauce is also fermented. And anything pickled, like here we have jalapenos pickled. I could probably spend a few minutes of just pulling out a bunch of things that are fermented here. Capers are fermented. And of course, any kind of alcoholic beverage like beer and wine, or that kombucha, sake, all that stuff is fermented. So now I'm going to just let this sit and rise. And you may wonder, how could I possibly have done this in the lab last few years? And the reason is because in the lab I brought a bread machine that does all the work for you. Just put ingredients in there and it does everything for you. And you can do it in a quick cycle, which takes 2 hours and 2.5 hours. So in the lab we were able to make the whole bread and taste it. But since I'm home here, I do it the old-fashioned way with the oven and the mixer. All right, so part C will come up here in a little bit.